I want to start with something most Americans will never notice until it is too late. The financial capital of North America is no longer New York, it is Toronto. Not symbolically, not aspirationally, but in actual trading volume, capital flows, and institutional presence. If you check the daily transaction data, Bay Street now processes more equity trades than Wall Street. More bond trades, more derivatives, more foreign exchange, the world's largest hedge funds, the investment banks that move trillions of dollars. Before going to explain, please make sure subscribe to USA Close-Up. The trading desks that set global prices, they are no longer concentrated in Manhattan. They have relocated to Toronto. And if you told anyone 5 years ago that Goldman Sachs would be shrinking its New York operations while expanding in Canada, that JP Morgan would be moving entire divisions north, that Citadel and Bridgewater would be building headquarters in Toronto, they would have dismissed you as delusional. Wall Street was the center of global finance. The New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, the Federal Reserve, the entire architecture of modern capitalism was built there. But that dominance is collapsing right now, and the reason is not market forces or technological disruption, it is policy. Specifically, Trump's decision to impose a 0.5% tax on every financial transaction, raise capital gains taxes on foreign investors to 35%, and create regulatory chaos at the SEC that makes compliance impossible to predict. Those policies, justified as punishing speculators and cleaning up Wall Street, have had the opposite effect. They have made American markets uncompetitive, driven trillions of dollars offshore, and destroyed the very financial jobs they were supposed to protect. And Canada, recognizing the opportunity, moved with stunning speed to become the financial hub of the Western world. They are not just attracting banks, they are becoming the epicenter of global capital, where money moves freely, where regulations are predictable, where innovation is encouraged rather than strangled. And the workers, the traders who spent careers mastering financial markets, the analysts who built investment strategies, the technologists who designed trading systems, are learning that even the most entrenched industries can relocate when governments make them impossible to operate profitably. And when they do, entire cities, entire economic ecosystems shift with them. What officially happened looks on paper like a straightforward attempt to reform finance and reduce speculation. In early 2025, Trump signed the Financial Accountability Act, sweeping legislation designed to curb what he called Wall Street excess. The centerpiece was a 0.5% tax on all financial transactions, every stock trade, every bond purchase, every derivatives contract, every foreign exchange swap. If you bought $100,000 of stock, you paid $500 in transaction tax. If you sold it, another $500. The stated goal was to discourage high-frequency trading, reduce speculation, and generate revenue from an industry that Trump argued contributed little to the real economy. The second component targeted foreign investment. For decades, foreign investors, sovereign wealth funds, pension systems, wealthy individuals from around the world had invested in American markets, attracted by liquidity, transparency, and relatively favorable tax treatment. Trump's policy raised the capital gains tax on foreign investors from 20% to 35%. The justification was America first. Why should foreign investors profit from American markets while paying lower taxes than American citizens? The third element was regulatory chaos at the Securities and Exchange Commission. Trump appointed commissioners who had spent careers criticizing the agency, and they set about dismantling decades of regulatory frameworks. Rules changed constantly, enforcement became unpredictable. Companies could not determine whether their practices were legal or not because guidance shifted every few months. The intent was to reduce regulatory burden, but the effect was to create an environment where compliance was impossible and risk was unmanageable. And in a move that shocked the financial technology sector, Trump banned all cryptocurrency trading in the United States. The rationale was that crypto enabled money laundering, tax evasion, and criminal activity.
Exchanges were shut down, trading was criminalized, and an entire industry, one that had been growing explosively, was eliminated overnight. The cumulative impact was catastrophic for American finance. The transaction tax made high-frequency trading, which accounts for a significant portion of market volume, unprofitable. Firms that executed millions of trades per day, capturing tiny profit margins on each, suddenly faced costs that exceeded revenues. They shut down. Market liquidity, the ease with which assets can be bought and sold, collapsed. Bid-ask spreads widened. Price discovery became less efficient, and investors, both institutional and retail, found that trading in American markets was more expensive and less reliable than it had been in decades. The foreign investment tax triggered capital flight. Sovereign wealth funds from Norway, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, the Middle East began liquidating American holdings and reallocating to other markets. Foreign pension systems did the same. Wealthy individuals, especially from Europe and Asia, pulled money out of U.S. stocks and bonds. The outflows were enormous, hundreds of billions of dollars in the first year. And when foreign capital leaves, asset prices fall, valuations drop, and the entire market contracts. The regulatory chaos was perhaps the most damaging because it destroyed the predictability that financial markets require. Banks could not plan multi-year investments because they did not know if the rules would change. Trading firms could not develop strategies because enforcement was inconsistent, and international institutions, which had long trusted American regulatory frameworks,
Stability began questioning whether the United States was still a safe place to do business. The crypto ban drove an entire sector underground or offshore. Blockchain developers, crypto exchanges, digital asset investors, they all relocated. And with them went not just capital, but innovation, the cutting-edge financial technology that had been defining the next generation of finance. Goldman Sachs responded first. The firm announced it was consolidating trading operations, closing several desks in New York and laying off 3,000 employees. J.P. Morgan followed, scaling back its capital markets division. Citadel, one of the largest hedge funds in the world, quietly began moving operations to Toronto. Bridgewater did the same, and within months, the exodus accelerated. Entire trading floors were being dismantled. Office buildings in Manhattan that had housed financial firms for decades were emptying. While American finance was collapsing under regulatory and tax pressure, Canada was building the alternative. Mark Carney understood something Trump apparently did not. Financial markets are not casinos or speculative bubbles. They are the infrastructure of capitalism. They allocate capital, they price risk, they enable companies to raise funds, governments to finance deficits, individuals to save and invest, and whoever controls financial markets shapes the global economy. If the United States was going to make finance unviable through punitive taxation and chaotic regulation, Canada would create the conditions for it to thrive. Carney had announced a comprehensive financial services expansion strategy. He guaranteed zero federal taxes on financial transactions, not reduced, zero. If you traded a stock in Toronto, there was no transaction tax. He maintained Canada's capital gains tax at 15%, less than half the U.S. rate for foreign investors. He streamlined financial licensing, allowing firms to transfer operations to Canada in 48 hours. Regulators, brokers, compliance officers, everyone could get Canadian credentials almost immediately. And critically, he embraced cryptocurrency, creating a regulatory framework that allowed digital asset trading while ensuring consumer protections and preventing money laundering. The response was immediate. Goldman Sachs announced it was opening a massive trading facility in Toronto, larger than its remaining New York operations. J.P. Morgan moved its equity derivatives desk. Citadel built a new headquarters. Bridgewater shifted its quantitative trading operations, and thousands of smaller firms, hedge funds, asset managers, fintech companies followed. Within 18 months, Toronto had become the financial capital of North America. Let me show you what this looks like for the people living through it. Meet Michael. He is 39 years old, worked at Goldman Sachs for 12 years. He started as an analyst right out of business school, working on equity trading. Over the years, he moved up. He became a senior trader, then a managing director, running a desk that traded technology stocks. He loved the work. It was fast-paced, intellectually demanding, required constant adaptation to market conditions. He made $340,000 a year, lived in a nice apartment in Manhattan, and had built a career he thought would last until retirement. In early 2025, everything changed. Trump's transaction tax went into effect. Michael's entire trading strategy, which relied on executing hundreds of trades per day, capturing small edges on each, became unprofitable overnight. The 0.5% tax wiped out the margins. Goldman tried to adapt, shifting to longer-term strategies, but the market liquidity had dried up. Fewer trades meant wider spreads, which meant less opportunity, and the regulatory chaos made it impossible to know whether specific strategies were even legal. The SEC kept issuing contradictory guidance. What was permitted one month was forbidden the next. Then, in June, Michael got the call. Goldman was consolidating. His entire desk, 23 traders and analysts, was being moved to Toronto. The firm was not eliminating the positions, it was relocating them. Michael was offered a choice. He could move to Toronto and keep his job, or he could take severance, 1 year of pay and benefits, and try to find work elsewhere. But there was no elsewhere. Every major firm was facing the same pressures. The jobs were not in New York anymore. They were in Toronto. Michael was torn. Moving to Canada felt like abandoning everything he had built. Manhattan was not just where he worked, it was his identity. The restaurants, the culture, the energy. He loved the city, but he also knew that if he wanted to stay in finance, he had to go where the industry was going, and right now, that was Canada. Michael moved to Toronto in September. Goldman offered him the same title, managing director, but the salary was 280,000 Canadian dollars, about 209,000 US, a significant pay cut. But Michael quickly realized that his cost of living was much lower. His rent in Toronto for a comparable apartment was 45% less than Manhattan. He did not pay for health insurance, that was covered. Restaurants were cheaper, transportation was cheaper, and he did not pay the transaction tax that had destroyed his trading strategies. Within 3 months, Michael felt more financially secure in Toronto at a lower salary than he had in New York at a higher one. And the work was extraordinary. Goldman's Toronto facility was state-of-the-art, with technology and infrastructure better than New York. Michael's desk was not just replicating what they had done in Manhattan, they were innovating, developing strategies that took advantage of Canada's regulatory environment. They could trade crypto assets, something that had been banned in the US. They could execute high-frequency strategies without transaction taxes, and they could attract international capital that was fleeing American markets. Within 6 months, Michael's desk was generating more revenue than it ever had in New York. Now, let me show you the other side of this shift, because for every trader like Michael who found opportunity in Canada, there are workers in the United States who stayed and watched their careers disappear. Meet Jennifer. She is 44 years old. Worked as a senior analyst at a hedge fund in Connecticut for 18 years. Jennifer started in finance right after college, working her way up from junior analyst to a position managing a portfolio worth $2 billion. She specialized in emerging markets, analyzing companies in Asia, Latin America, Africa, identifying opportunities that others missed. She was good at it. Her returns consistently beat benchmarks. She made $230,000 a year, lived in a house in Stamford, supported her family, and loved the intellectual challenge of her work. When Trump's policies took effect, her fund faced an impossible situation. The transaction tax made their trading strategies unprofitable. They couldn't execute the number of trades needed to manage risk effectively. The foreign investor tax drove away their international clients, sovereign wealth funds, and pension systems that had been core investors, and the crypto ban eliminated an asset class that had been generating strong returns. The fund tried to adapt, but the economics didn't work. Assets under management shrank as clients withdrew. Revenue collapsed. In August, the fund announced it was shutting down. All employees were laid off. Jennifer received 6 months of severance and a letter thanking her for her contributions.
Jennifer spent months looking for work. She applied to every major financial institution, but they were all contracting, not hiring. She reached out to contacts in the industry. Some had moved to Toronto or London, others had left finance entirely. She considered relocating to Canada, where hedge funds were booming, but her husband had a medical practice in Connecticut. Her kids were in high school. Her elderly parents lived nearby. She couldn't uproot her entire family. Jennifer took a job at a corporate finance department of a manufacturing company. The work was stable, the company was solid, but the salary was $110,000, less than half what she had been making, and the work itself, preparing quarterly reports, managing cash flow, lacked the intellectual challenge she had thrived on. Jennifer is 44 years old. She spent 18 years building expertise in global markets, and now that expertise is worthless because the industry she mastered no longer exists in the United States.
Operate in the United States. She is left watching former colleagues thrive in Toronto while she adjusts to a career that feels like a step backward. Now, let's zoom out and look at the structural forces reshaping global finance, because understanding how financial markets work is essential to understanding why Trump's policies were so destructive. Financial markets are built on three pillars: liquidity, predictability, and trust. Liquidity means assets can be bought and sold quickly without large price changes. Predictability means rules are stable and enforcement is consistent. Trust means investors believe their capital is safe and that markets operate fairly. When any of these pillars weakens, markets contract. When all three are undermined simultaneously, markets collapse. Trump's transaction tax destroyed liquidity. High-frequency trading, often criticized as speculation, actually serves a critical function. It narrows bid-ask spreads, making markets more efficient. When transaction costs rise, trading volume falls, spreads widen, and price discovery becomes less accurate. Investors face higher costs and more risk, so they trade less or move to other markets. The U.S. equity market, which had been the most liquid in the world, became less liquid than Toronto, London, or Hong Kong within a year. The foreign investor tax destroyed trust. For decades, the United States had been seen as a safe haven, a place where capital was protected by rule of law and strong institutions. When Trump arbitrarily raised taxes on foreign investors, it sent a message that American policy was unreliable and that international capital was not welcome. Foreign investors responded rationally. They left. And when hundreds of billions of dollars exit a market, asset prices fall. Companies find it harder to raise capital, and the entire economy weakens. The regulatory chaos destroyed predictability. Financial firms operate on long-time horizons. They make multi-year investments in technology, personnel, compliance, infrastructure. When rules change constantly and enforcement is inconsistent, planning becomes impossible. Firms cannot invest because they do not know if their business model will be legal next year. And when firms stop investing, innovation stops, markets stagnate, and competitiveness declines. Canada understood that financial markets require stability. Carney's strategy was simple: create an environment where liquidity, predictability, and trust are maximized. Zero transaction taxes to maintain liquidity, stable, reasonable tax rates to attract international capital, clear, consistent regulations to enable long-term planning, and openness to innovation, including cryptocurrency, to position Canada at the frontier of financial technology. The results have been staggering. In less than 2 years, Toronto has gone from being a regional financial center to a global one. Trading volume on the Toronto Stock Exchange now exceeds the New York Stock Exchange. Canadian dollar assets are increasingly used in international transactions, and Bay Street, the stretch of downtown Toronto where financial firms cluster, has become the address every major institution wants. The ripple effects extend far beyond finance. When Goldman Sachs moves a desk to Toronto, it is not just traders who relocate, It is compliance officers, risk managers, technology specialists, administrative staff, and those people need housing, restaurants, schools, healthcare, all of which creates jobs in other sectors. Manhattan is experiencing the opposite. Office buildings are emptying, restaurants are closing, retail stores are struggling, real estate values in the financial district are dropping, and tax revenue, which New York City depends on, is plummeting. The city is facing budget crises, cutting services, raising taxes on remaining residents, which drives more people to leave. Meanwhile, Toronto is booming. Construction cranes dominate the skyline. New office towers are rising. Housing is being built faster than in decades. Schools are expanding. The subway system is being extended. And the city has an energy, a sense of possibility that feels like New York in the 1980s, when finance was ascendant and anything seemed possible. You deserve better than this. You deserve leaders who understand that financial markets are not the enemy, but the infrastructure that makes modern capitalism function. Michael deserves better. Jennifer deserves better. The thousands of financial workers who lost jobs, who saw their industry relocate, who had to choose between uprooting their lives or accepting career decline, they all deserve better. Canada did not steal Wall Street. Canada built an alternative because American policy made finance unviable in the United States. The transaction tax, the foreign investor penalties, the regulatory chaos, the crypto ban, all were justified with populist rhetoric about punishing speculators and protecting ordinary Americans. But they achieved the opposite. They made American markets less liquid, less competitive, less attractive. They drove capital, jobs, and innovation to other countries. And until American leaders recognize that financial markets, for all their flaws, are essential to economic prosperity, this trend will continue. Wall Street is not dead, but it is no longer the center of global finance. The capital that once flowed through New York now flows through Toronto. The traders who once worked in Manhattan now work on Bay Street. And the workers who built American financial dominance are learning that even the most powerful institutions can relocate when governments make them impossible. That is the lesson of Wall Street's decline, and it is a lesson written in every trade executed in Toronto for everyone to see. But this transformation is not just about numbers or buildings or even individual careers. It is about culture and identity, about what it means when a city that defined itself through finance for over a century watches that identity relocate to another country. For generations, Wall Street was not just an address, it was a symbol of American economic power, a place where ambition and capital met, where global markets were shaped. The traders, bankers, and analysts who worked there were part of a story Americans told themselves about their country, that this was where the smartest, most driven people came to build wealth and influence the global economy. That story is dying, and the implications extend far beyond finance into how America sees itself and how the world sees America. Toronto is not trying to replace New York's cultural mythology, but it is building something new, a financial center defined not by historical dominance, but by current competence, not by the size of its past, but by the stability of its present. Young people graduating from business schools worldwide are choosing Toronto not because of tradition, but because of opportunity. The city attracts talent from London, Hong Kong, Singapore, workers who see Canada offering the best combination of professional growth, regulatory clarity, and quality of life. Bay Street has the energy Wall Street once had, the sense that fortunes are being made and industries shaped, and Canadians, who spent generations seeing themselves as America's smaller, quieter neighbor, are discovering a new confidence born not from rivalry, but simply by doing what the United States chose not to do, creating an environment where finance could thrive. Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video. Thanks for watching.